Okay, so I'm a philosopher working originally in England, focusing on European philosophy, particularly in the German language initially, but then I focused on certain aspects of philosophy which relate to data and to what we call ontologies, which are attempts to describe data in consistent ways to make computers work better together. And as a result of that work, I gradually moved over into areas of computer science and data technology, always bringing my philosophical interests to bear. And now I have quite an important role in ontology work in the US government, the Defense Department, the Department of Homeland Security. I'm also part of a team which is trying to bring about ontological or data consistency in the 5 Eyes, which are the 5 English language intelligence communities. And I guess that's enough.
So, yeah, I'm by training physician, biochemist, and mathematician, and I've been using AI theoretically and practically to make a living since 1998. So I've always been in the AI field. Mostly I've been using it in life sciences and medicine since I'm a physician, but I've also used it for the insurance industry and other domains. So I have quite a good cross-industry understanding of AI usage and its possibilities and limitations. I've always been making a living of it. And when Barry and I met 15 years ago in the context of standardization of medicinal data exchange, or medical data exchange, and then we started collaborating scientifically, and 10 years ago, we started working on AI together. And now the second edition of our book that you describe as somewhat contentious is just being published these days, which I think is also a reason why we are talking. And it shows that though the book is a bit debated, it is a success because books of this nature usually don't get second editions. It's a very complicated, very scientific, very technical book that requires a lot of prior knowledge. And so it's not a mass compatible book. But I think it's very important that we have done it, and I'm glad that we got the opportunity to make a second edition.
Just for clarity, when we talk about artificial intelligence, what are we talking about?
So we are talking about mathematical algorithms that are based on regularities that can be found in data. And the regularities can be exploited with various ways. So there are explicit and implicit ways to exploiting these regularities, and that has 2 advantages. First of all, you can find new regular patterns. Like when you use this to look at galaxies, you can find certain aspects of galaxies that you cannot see with the bare eye, right? Or star systems. You can use such algorithms to analyze them. You can also use them to analyze chemical molecules, the similarity of chemical molecules, many applications. Where it's used, like a telescope is used to enhance the human eye, right? It's a tool to find regularities that human eye can't see because there are too many data points. The second application is automation, when you basically can exploit the regularities to automate certain aspects of human behavior. And this is what AI really is. It's a applied mathematics leveraging regularities that can be found in data. And it has now evolved very much, but it has nothing to do with creating something that is akin to human or animal intelligence.
I think it's worth pointing out that this is a new kind of mathematics. So originally mathematics was performed by human beings using a paper and pencil, and they would write down theorems and try and prove them. And what we have now is mathematical algorithms which are created by feeding huge amounts of data into a computer. So we create algorithms which we do not understand. The algorithms are incredibly long polynomial functions. When we issue a prompt into a large language model, the large language model will calculate the value of that function for that prompt and give an output. That's just a mathematical process, but the mathematics has been created by pushing all kinds of data in large amounts into the machine.
But importantly, the machine cannot do this, cannot create the parameters of this equation by itself. But what there is a optimization function that basically has many meta parameters and parameters that are used to then create the final parameterization of the model. And all this is created by humans, and especially the algorithms to optimize the way that the data are treated to then finally come up with the solution. And it's always the following principle. Imagine you have millions of emails, and then you have for each of the email the information whether that's a spam email or not. And then the algorithm is basically used to recreate the relationship between the email content and the indication whether it's spam or not. And this way you create a spam filter. And the algorithms that are needed to do this, they require a lot of memory of the computer, a lot of data, and a lot of computational power. So the idea for this algorithm was formulated around 1800 by Gauss and Legendre, and also Polish mathematician whose name I keep forgetting, but whom we cite in the book. And then it took 200 years for the machines to evolve so that these algorithms can be really computed in a high-end manner that creates the models that we have today. So that's a big difference and the big step that happened, that we now have a kind of implicit mathematics that arises from data under the supervision of humans who basically create all the mathematical constraints that lead to the parameterization.
When you say machines will never rule the world, what exactly do you mean?
So the rulers have to have certain kinds of intelligence. They have to know how to control people, how to make things happen, but they also have to want to make things happen. They're very ambitious. They have desires to control and so forth. And these wants filter down to all the people who work for them. They want to do certain things. They want to impress their bosses and so forth. Now, the big difference between a human being and a mathematical algorithm is that human beings can want things. They have a will. They intend things. They push themselves through in order to bring about things. Mathematical algorithms, they're not the kinds of things that can want. They don't have desires. It doesn't make sense. They get inputs and they create outputs through a mathematical process. Now, it's a very complicated mathematical process, and they can be processed to emulate wanting. For instance, in the chess-playing computer. The chess-playing computer wants to win, but only in a very weak sense, that it's learned to emulate the sorts of patterns which human beings use when they want to win. But they don't want anything. Again, it's the human which tells the computer, by switching it on and programming it, you're going to follow these moves because then you'll win. And so it's always a matter of emulating the human will. And they can do it for formal domains, closed domains like chess, very well. But when it comes to controlling a battalion in an army, or anything which has even any degree of complexity, then the computer will fail.
So basically, to summarize it or put it in slightly different words, we cannot make the computer have an ego. You need an ego and a will for power, right? Power means that you can realize more possibilities than others in a world of limited resources. That's the definition by Thomas Hobbes. And basically, and to achieve this, you need an ego that is the center of your acts and that lets you plan, conceive, and scheme and do all of this so that you can exert power. So we cannot give consciousness to machines, we cannot give a will to machines, and we cannot give intelligence to machines. But all three are needed so that machines can rule. So the point is, machines will not be an ethical agent, but machines can be used to optimize rule. Since IBM introduced the punch card system in the 1930s, and the Nazis started using it for the concentration camps. So machines can be used to enhance rule and to make it more effective, but they are not acting themselves. And that's a big difference that has to be made.
But okay, so a counter argument might be, but can machines not rule accidentally?
So ruling accidentally doesn't make sense. What the machine could do is to, by accident, interfere in some rule-based set of processes. So maybe, for instance, you have a rule-based set of processes which is initiated by a human being, and the machine just fails to work at a crucial point, and so that complex chain of commands breaks.
Nuclear war example, when the machine misinterprets something and then a nuclear war gets started, right? Yeah. We have had these situations, I think, 2 times in the 1980s, where human actors had to stop such a wrong process, which came from a technical mistake of the machine. And that happens all the time now during the Ukraine war. Both parties are heavily using AI, and the AI is creating false signals, and then the humans have to interpret this and to stop and to not misreact, and so this can happen, but that doesn't mean the machine rules. It just means that the tooling is not doing what it's supposed to do.
Where does this mass fear come from? Elon Musk has constantly posited the idea that AI is an existential threat.
So historically, there has been a movement since the 1990s that there will be the singularity. And this singularity movement says that it's a point at which the machines will overtake human intelligence, which presupposes that they have also consciousness, at least, right? And this has been I think, postmodern idea that is now 35 years old, and it has gained a lot of importance in circles in which Elon Musk is influenced. So there's Nick Bostrom, who's one of the leading figures of the singularity movement, Ray Kurzweil, who was in the second wave of AI, a real genius engineer who is also one of the inventors of this idea. And then there are Curtis Jarvin and Dick Land, who are theoreticians of the Dark Enlightenment, a theory adhered by Elon Musk and Peter Thiel. And so they are now very, very culturally influential. It's all part of this transhumanism movement that we are now faced with.
So there are various components here. One component is hype. So Elon and his friends, they want to exaggerate the powers and the importance of AI because they need a lot of money in order to build their AI machines, which are incredibly costly in machines and energy and so forth. So they need money. Also, they want money in order to maintain their status and for all the other reasons, and even because they want to do good things with the money, I assume. But now the more important feature is they want to live forever. So they really do believe in the idea of digital immortality, and that would mean that you can build a computer which can simulate you, and then we would program the computer to keep you alive in this very weakened sense, since you're not actually a body anymore, you're just a pattern of data, to keep you alive forever without any diseases and with wonderfully attractive partners and all the other good things that go with digital immortality. They believe in all of that. As a result, well, they believe in all of that, then they must believe that it's possible, which means that they must believe that computers can think in ways which exceed by far the capabilities of human beings.
So this hype has the function, that's the ideological and almost religious part or pseudo-religious part, but there's also a really economic part of this, which I want to highlight once more. I think that the fear of AI taking over is driving regulation that creates barriers of market entry for newcomers to the field. And when you have a monopoly or oligopoly, you always want the state to regulate. And this has also been the case even in the Middle Ages for weapons manufacturing, right? That weapons manufacturers wanted to prevent others from entering the market, so that they tried to get the state to make laws that guarantee their monopoly. That's the same here. So all the barriers that are now erected by regulators help the monopolies, and so the hype is used to erect those barriers, right? This is very classical. So that's the rational part from an economic perspective that has to be understood. And so the hype is created like the COVID hype was created because it's a business model.
So it falls under that category of an invisible boogeyman.
Yeah. A nice bogeyman, attractive bogeyman who'll make you live forever.
Like SARS-CoV-2 or climate change, right? These are also boogeymen that drive businesses.
Yeah.
And of course, because it's invisible, you as a layman can't really fight back. So you kind of have to trust the authorities or the powerful actors.
Yeah. This is a recipe that the great and grand inquisitor in Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov describes, right? If you raise a fear specter that a normal person cannot question, then it's a very effective way of ruling.
Yeah.
That's why the book is also controversial, because it puts into question a huge fear hype of our time, which is the domination of humankind by AI. And also another one, a weaker one that is even more scary to most people, is the replacement of all normal jobs. Yuval Harari, Klaus Schwab, all these guys all the time say, also even Trump, Putin, all the leaders of the Northern Hemisphere say that AI is going to replace hundreds of millions of jobs. That's absolutely wrong. The rationalization potential of AI is now rather moderate, and we can go into details why that's the case. But that's another hype that is driving a lot of politics. Is this fear of AI replacing human workers? And interestingly, also all the alternative media, everybody buys into this. Also, the critics of these oligarchic structures, they believe this, right? And they all say, "Oh yes, it's so dangerous. Soon we will not have jobs anymore." And the tariffs, once the tariffs kick in and America starts to reindustrialize, all the reindustrialization will be done with robots. That's absolute nonsense. But you can read. So the boss of BlackRock just said it yesterday on Twitter. He said that the new jobs created under the tariff regime will all be taken by robots, which is complete nonsense. But you see that this is also a very important part of this narrative.
What is intelligence?
So shall I have a go at that? So the most important parts are as follows. So an intelligent being can react spontaneously to new kinds of phenomena. That's the first thing. And they can do this without being trained. And so already computers can't be intelligent. And this definition, it's not invented by Jobst and myself. It's the standard psychological definition for 100 years. So it's spontaneous behavior which has not been trained, which brings about a relative improvement in the situation of the behaving subject on the basis, which is also novel. That's the most important part. So you encounter a situation of a type which you've never encountered before. Because you're intelligent, you can react to that situation in a way which is appropriate to your well-being, even though you've not been trained. Machines can't do that because they rest on training. That training always gives them the capacity to respond to situations for which they have been trained, but they can't respond to situations for which they have not been trained. We can do that. Human beings can do that because they're intelligent.
And so just to give one simple example, if you get the driver's license, learn to drive, you're not going to go through all possible situations that can arise while driving. But when you start then driving on your own without your teacher, when you have the license, you get into such situations. And while of course more accidents happens to beginners, many beginners can avoid accidents even at the beginning of their driving experience because they're intelligent. Machines can't do that, right? So machines can only react to situations they've been configured. So they always talk about training, but in reality it's a configuration. So they have been configured either implicitly or explicitly to react to. And when their situation arises for which they have not been configured, there's a very high likelihood that they don't react in the right way. And that's why all the self-driving cars that are, for example, managed by Waymo in California are actually drones, which have pilots. And each car has its own pilot. And because the likelihood of mistakes is so high that you cannot have one pilot for 5 cars, you need one pilot for 1 car.
If you just look around you, everything is controlled by machines. Is that not true? I mean, you'll get up in the morning and your phone starts telling you when you need to leave and when you need to eat and all sorts of things now.
So you told your phone that you want it to wake you up the next day. The phone isn't acting intelligently. It's doing what it's told. Computers are quite good at doing what they're told. And so you gave that one example. I don't know if maybe because you're sitting there with your headphones 9 hours out of 10, you feel as if you are overwhelmed by machines. But actually you are pressing all the buttons, you're making all the decisions. The machines are providing tools. And they're no more oppressive tools than any other kinds of tools, unless we make them oppressive. So somebody may take over your headphones, but it would be a human being who does that. It wouldn't be a machine.
So there is a book by classic dystopia by Samyatin called We or Us. I don't know the English. It's a Russian fiction book of the 20s. It's actually a precursor to 1984 and Brave New World. And both Huxley and Orwell knew it. And I just read it. It's worth reading because it's the first really modern dystopian novel. And in this novel, everything is controlled by collective. Small collectives that controls the entire society, and they're using machines to control humans, but they are programming the machines. And so when you imagine now that we are moving to a technocratic, post-democratic age, you can use machines to control humans. So you could, for example, centrally program the wake-up time, centrally program the advice, what to eat, and so on. So as a tool of power, digitization is very, very, very dangerous and can have very big consequences, because imagine the Soviet Union operating not with paper and mail as they did, but operating and telephone and telefax, they had this, but operating with a completely digital infrastructure. So, but the key point to make is that the digitization is the problem here and not AI. Right? AI provides a tiny proportion of the control capabilities of such a digital net, as some dissidents call it, control net, right? But most of it is just the infrastructure and humans running the infrastructure. It's the ability to locate everyone via this device every time, to listen into their conversations in emails. But all of this has to be done by humans, because machines don't understand what we write and say, nor the movement patterns we do. They can only aggregate them, but they can't understand them. So the real threat to freedom is digitization and not AI. And many people don't understand this because they confound digitization and AI, but AI is something very special. It's a very tiny part of what is done with our data. Most of what is done with our data is that they get stored in big databases, and that then they are searched and exploited to do things, but AI is only a tiny part. In war, AI is actually more important than in civil life, and that has the following reason. Now there are millions of sensors deployed in a battle, in an armed conflict. Like there's from satellites down to sensors buried in the soil. There are many different types of sensors that can measure the whole electromagnetic spectrum, but also vibrations, sounds. It's a very, very complicated array of technology that is now gathering signals, and then has to turn this raw data into signals and patterns that can be interpreted by human beings, so that in the command and control center of an army, all these data are then gathered and looked at to decide what to do next. And so for warfare, especially for reconnaissance, AI is completely indispensable, and it's the key tool now to do warfare. Do the drones attack on their own? No. But the defensive systems that we have now, especially the Russian S-400, S-600 series, but also the Iron Dome, though the Iron Dome is a bit outdated technologically, these defense systems are totally AI-driven, right? So no human can actually replace what an S-400 system can do. So what we have is reconnaissance and defense systems are already very much dependent on AI. Attack systems not so much, for complicated reasons I could go into if you want. So the reason why attack systems are not so prone to be used with AI is that unless you, so of course you can, like the cruise missiles, you can define a target and the cruise missile will autonomously hit the target. But that's good old-fashioned AI mostly. There is also stochastic AI built into the cruise missiles because they have to analyze obstacles and so on, and fly around obstacles which may not be on their map and so on. But basically it's a deterministic process. However, autonomous attack would mean that you could have drones that fly as a group to somewhere and decide on their own whom to attack and when to attack. And this is a very, very complicated cognitive task that we cannot put into AI. And therefore, on the attack side, we don't have a lot of AI that is making the missions.
Can it not get to a point where it can simulate self-made decisions?
So our argument is that there's a saturation of what is possible with mathematical algorithms, and we are getting close to the saturation now. And the saturation comes from two sources. One level of saturation is that partial differential equations, the classical tool for in physics, for explicit mathematics, have only limited scope, limited number of variables, limited scope to what they can be applied. They're usually applied to artificial systems, to experimental systems that are set up in a way that they can yield such equations. And that's how physics works. And now if we go to the implicit, and this is a core argument of our book, and I try to make it as possible. The implicit, if you assume that by giving the machine more data, you can get it better and better, exponentially better even, as you said, that is wrong. And that has to do with the following. If the data contain regularities, you obtain saturation of the model. That means after giving it enough data, the model understands the pattern or gets a configuration that mimics this pattern, and now it can be deployed and working. So this is in chess and Go, even in non-interactive poker, all these closed world situations where you have clear patterns, the machine gets this pattern via the configuration, and then it becomes better than the human. But in open world situation, you have what we call non-ergodic systems. Non-ergodic systems create patterns that are not repetitive, and they have no regularity. So when you give more data to the machine, it cannot learn. It cannot saturate it because there's no pattern to pick up. But the machine always can only get to pattern. And so because human behavior is so complex and erratic, it's non-ergodic. This conversation is non-ergodic. We couldn't foresee what we would be talking about, though we are talking about a general topic. And this is the same in a family. If you deal with your child, you want to take it outside, but the child doesn't want to. You didn't expect this. Then your wife says, "But come on, let's then do something inside." I mean, you never can predict how human interactions. And that same is true in warfare. Read the Clausewitz book on warfare and the chapter on friction. One of the best texts on warfare, it's chapter 7 or 8, it's relatively early in the book, where he describes what happens. You have a plan for the attack, and then you conduct the attack, and everything falls apart. All your plans make no sense anymore because something is different than you planned. The enemy is reacting in a different way. That he calls that friction. And friction is a non-ergodicity. And non-ergodicity is patternless. And then humans at all levels of the command chain have to react to this situation, and that decides in the end who wins the war, who makes the better decisions, which is extremely complicated. And I think that there is no pattern to be learned here, and that because of this, we are not going to see an exponential improvement in the algorithms.
I'm following what you're saying. So in other words, it reaches a point where it can go no further.
Yeah, this is the doctrine of scaling, which Musk and all the other AI gods have assumed. Namely, the more data we have, scramble, get more data, even make up data,
yes,
which is what they do now. And then our machines will become more and more intelligent without limit. And so all we need is more and more data. But that scaling rule, it's been shown in the last few months in a very clear way, it doesn't hold. Just as Moore's law, which predicted a continual increase in power of processors, is now beginning to fail because they're reaching the limits of what you can do with tiny engineering. So the scaling rule, it's been abandoned, and that was a big shock for OpenAI, for instance, because they had to reconceive their goals, and they wanted to have 4.5, ChatGPT 4.5. They plateaued before they got that far. They gave up. They turned towards other methods, which in some cases are more old-fashioned than the new stochastic AI methods that they have.
So to give you an example for this limitation. So yesterday I asked Grok, another AI, who is Basil Valentine, the alchemist, the medieval alchemist, right? And the algorithm said searching the web. Why did it do so? Because they have now built in an algorithm that tries to estimate the likelihood that the model, the LLM behind ChatGPT, can on its own give a good answer. If the likelihood is too low, what they do is they search the web with the classical Google search or Google-like search, get all the text from the web describing Basil Valentine, and gives this to the model, asking it to summarize the input. Then the model creates the answer. So now they have already built in deterministic elements into the algorithm because it's overwhelmed. And why is it overwhelmed? Why doesn't it scale anymore? Because the regularities in the body of the global internet language have been exploited now. And so now the models cannot become any better. On the contrary wise, now the internet contains output of these models, right? There are pages full of the output of these models, and if you put them into the models again, they deteriorate. Right?
Yes.
So I think that all these claims are based on a lack of understanding of the mathematical nature of these models. And only
Okay,
if
so basically Grok, DeepSeek, and ChatGPT are just better search engines.
No, they are more than that. So the example I gave only shows that they're now combining different technologies because they have reached the limits of what they can do. No, the LLMs are something new. The LLM, the core LLM idea is that you use the body of human language published on the internet to train a gigantic stochastic model that can put together sequences of letters that make sense to humans in a certain context. And that is fantastic. So what the model does, it takes a string of letters and continues this sequence in such a way that the continued sequence is the output that makes sense to the human. The machine doesn't understand what it does, but it's an absolute tremendous achievement and a milestone in the evolution of science that these LLMs are possible.
But I think we should mention also that even at this stage, they still produce hallucinations.
Yes, this is now a more important point. Why do they produce the hallucinations? They produce the hallucinations because 90% of the training material they receive is machine-made. And this, if you look at how the algorithms are trained, there are 3 stages. And I simplify now. The first stage is you just give them the global text of the internet and then ask them to create the same output with some words missing. It's called skipgram technique. There are other techniques. And this way they learn the structure of language. They are parameterized for this. And then in the second step, you give them question-answer pairs designed by humans to train them to create, based on a question, the right answer. But in the last step, you are then the machine is creating question-answer pairs itself based on the pattern of the human. And these question-answer pairs are artificial. And they are the bulk of the training material because the models with millions or billions of parameters are so data greedy that you need trillions and trillions of data points. And most of them are created by the machine itself in this last training step. Now what the machine creates itself is always of lower quality than what the human creates because it only basically takes a kind of, it cannot take into account the long tail of the distribution. It can only, if the distribution looks like this, right? It has a long tail. The long tail is not taken into account, only the first part of the tail. And that makes a poor quality. And the hallucinations come from this step. And also not only the hallucinations, but also other inaccuracies. For example, if you would say, please summarize, if you would give it, not ask it to summarize Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, but give it the entire text and ask it to summarize it, would create inconsistencies. All of this is based on, if you summarize Brothers Karamazov, it will only go to the Wikipedia page and give what is given there. But if you would give it the full text, it will create mistakes. And that's all based on this necessity to synthetically create a lot of training data. And the synthetic training data are always weak. And that is a very, very big problem of these models.
The systems were originally trained to avoid responses like, I don't know.
Yes.
They were trained to be friendly. And so if they really don't know, then they make something up. And they're still doing that.
I call this Hollywood friendliness, right? So a classical German would always prefer to say, I don't know, instead of lying, right? But in Hollywood, it's better to lie than to say, I don't know.
But they also are trained to censor.
Oh, so this is actually interesting. That they call this the moderation API, and so the question is how the models are very biased, right? So if you ask it how many genders there are, they will answer hundreds of genders. If you ask what can we do against climate catastrophe, they will not say there is no climate catastrophe, but they will list a lot of measures, right? So they are very politically biased. And if you ask it, can you please describe the positive qualities of Stalin? They will refuse to do so, right?
Yeah.
And so they are censored and biased. And there are many sources of bias. Let me list a few. One is that most of the texts that are published on the internet are also already biased. So the models pick up the bias of the text. This is especially true with Islam. There are a lot of Islamic texts that are, from a liberal perspective, dangerous, but they are just trained and learn. And so if you ask about Islam, you get astonishing answers, which come from this primary bias. Then there's a secondary bias, which comes from the training questions and answers that are given to the model, right? So if you train the model, parameterize the model to give a certain type of answers to a certain type of question, this is then influencing in a deep fashion the parameterization of the model. So for example, the Google Gemini model was drawing black popes and female popes. I think beginning of last year, because it was so heavily biased. And then they tried to correct it with new training rounds, but the parameterization was so deeply enrooted into the model that they couldn't get rid of it anymore. And then there's another, they had to throw away the entire model and retrain it, which is actually means throwing away billions. It costs billions to train such a model. And then the another source of bias is, of course, the moderation API, which is basically blocking politically incorrect questions and answers with another layer of stochastic classification algorithm, and so this is how the models are overall very biased.
I often test that. So on DeepSeek, which we know comes from China, if you ask it, is Taiwan independent? It simply refuses to answer. It will not engage in that discussion. ChatGPT will give you what would appear to be a very politically Western answer.
Yes, and so let's review. This is not a novel phenomenon. So if you think of the indulgency letters of the 15th and 16th century, right, was a big industry to finance all the projects of the Vatican. And if you would ask any priest, do I really need an indulgency letter? The priest at a certain level of hierarchy would always say yes, of course. Though even himself may not have believed in the indulgency letter. Why is this so? Because he was financed by the church. And the church was an oligarchic institution running a huge budget with a huge organizational network and so on. So the same is happening now. These models are not innocent. They cost billions. But only very few people can gather this amount of money, and of course they have a certain intention when they spend this money. They don't spend it for the benefit of mankind. I mean, there are aspects of these models that are beneficial, that's for sure. But their primary intent is that they have a private intention, which has to do with creating more wealth, more power, and so on. And so therefore the models have to be in line with their views. Now, for example, Elon Musk is claimed that his own AI, which is I think called Grok, is not woke. But so what he has done, he has changed it a bit so that it doesn't talk about LGBTQ too much. But it still has the same problems with climate and gender and so on. So basically, you can it's quite transparent how these models are biased towards the ideas or ideologies of those who pay for them.
But now, when we talk about AI now in the year 2025, we pretty much always only refer to these LLMs. I'm guessing this is a term that has become very misleading. It probably means a whole lot more, doesn't it?
So AI contains three types of algorithms. Deterministic AI, which is a good old-fashioned AI that was invented since the 1950s. It's searching, planning, machine inference. All of this is deterministic. This is how the chess computer of IBM worked, and this is the first big pillar of AI, and that's built into all. ChatGPT contains also a lot of this deterministic AI. The second pillar is the neural networks, is like LLMs. This is stochastic AI. This is the second pillar, and the third pillar are mixed models that contain hybrid models that contain both of these types of AIs, and all these get engineered. And the art of AI engineering is what I've been making a living of, is to select, given a certain problem, to solve the right mix of all these components to get the best algorithm that you can get with today's technology. That's what AI, the field of AI, is about. And this focus on LLMs is only so big because they have been, since Google Translate was first made available, creating superficial but quite spectacular results. And that's why everybody talks about them. Or generative AI, they call it, when you can ask software to draw a picture for you. That's quite spectacular. But the AI field is of course bigger than that.
Yeah, and with the pictures, if you ask it to produce a picture with captions, the captions will very often be nonsensical, even though you give explicit requests. And then the other dimension, which Elon is fond of talking about these days, is the robotics dimension. So he thinks that within N years we will have 5 years we will have robots that can perform all of the intricate maneuvers with their bodies that humans can perform. And robotics is embarrassingly slow to evolve. So they still look silly. They have robot dogs that look silly. That's decades now. And so optimism about robotics too, it seems to me, is very much overplayed.
The reason why robotics is so slow, if you talk to serious robotics experts, is one core characteristic of humans and animals, which is called sensomotorical or motosensorical behavior. So that basically means that while you are performing a motor behavior, like speaking, you're also hearing yourself. And when you're moving your hand and touching something, you're also sensing the effect of your motion. And there's a circuit, a very complicated circuit of all the time correcting the motion based on the sensory input created by the motion itself. And it's super complex. And this is basically discovery of Charles Sanders Peirce, who was the first to describe this, and then psychologists, J.J. Gibson, many psychologists took it on, also philosophers, and we know now a lot about this this phenomenon, but we don't know how to engineer it. It's as complex as intelligence, and without it, you cannot get the type of mechanics, of fine mechanics, that humans can perform. And so I think this belief in robots replacing humans everywhere is as I don't know, narrow-minded and short-sighted.
But hold on, Jobst. So somebody might respond to that by saying, yes, but this particular car factory, which had all these workers, now have machines.
Yes, but there was a huge wave of rationalization of human labor since 1850. Right, since I don't know when the automatic weaving machines were invented in England. That was 1850s or so, 1860s, and then since then there has been, of course, a massive increase of productivity every year until 2010. And over the last 15 years, though we are now in the big AI wave, we have not seen productivity increase in the West anymore. And even China still has productivity increase because they are still industrializing, but so they have an average. But Germany has not been able to have, even Germany, who was the last country, and Switzerland, to have increments in productivity, which means less human labor for the same amount of goods. We don't have this anymore, and and that's because the low-hanging fruit have already been mechanized over the last 150 years. So now there is the room for additional mechanization of labor, also even intellectual labor, but it's in the lower percent. It's up 5, 6, 7, maybe 10%, but certainly not more. So it's not enough to offset the decline in our demographies, for example. And so that's because the low-hanging fruit have already been taken away. So a better example, even in the car industry, where there's still quite a lot of human beings working, is the chemical industry. So BASF in the 70s, their campus had 15,000 workers. Now it has just less than 1,000. Right? So because everything is now controlled by machines, because chemical reactions can be automated almost perfectly. And now you have only engineers there. No blue helmets, only white helmets left, right? Very few helmets. These are the people who repair the machines, but that's it. And so the low-hanging fruit have already been used up, and now it's getting very, very hard to do further mechanization. And it's very naive to believe that what is now left of human labor in a car factory can easily be mechanized, right? It's very, very hard. And the robotics expert, they go there and look at it and say, gosh, we can't do that, right? And so therefore, the idea so if we reindustrialize America and put car factories back into America, it means that we use traditional robots in these factories, but not that we use robots that do the fine motorical work.
Yeah, but also it's worth noting that traditional robots are usually welded to the bench.
Yes.
And that's because if you have robots walking around, they're too liable to cause accidents, including accidents of killing human beings by crashing into them, because they just don't have the intelligent reactions that human beings have when they're engaging with each other.
And of course, if yes, sorry, go on.
No, they look silly.
They
look silly.
So I remember 10, 15 years ago, there was this huge program. It was called Robotics 3.0 or 4.0. I don't know which digit they used. But they said now the robot is coming out of the cage, finally. Because the robots are all in cages. And the cages are there to protect the humans who still are in the factory from the movements of the robotic arms have a huge momentum. If you get hit on the head by such an arm, you're dead. For sure, right? Or your head is being cut off. And so therefore they are all operating in cages. And they said, now we set the robot free of the cage, but it never happened. And if you talk to real robotics experts, they can point out in a very detailed way why that is the case. And this problem of sensory motor behavior is unsolved, and I think it's unsolvable.
You mentioned chess a few times, and I love chess. And something that I thought about, and I didn't realize this until I read your book, but chess has a very large number of, opening moves, and I guess that's part of the magic of playing the game. It seems almost infinite, but it is, as you say, a closed system. There will be a point at which there are no more new opening moves. Whereas if I go for dinner with my wife, that is an open system because anything can happen from leaving the house to coming back home.
Yeah, like yesterday we were served cold pizza, you didn't expect it.
I think the most embarrassing feature of the developments in AI in the last years is the failure still to create coherent, friendly chatbots who can respond to telephone calls when you call your bank. That you always have to adjust the level of your voice, the clarity of your requests, and so forth, in order to get any kind of friendly response from these chatbots. Now that is a scandal. They've been trying to build those chatbots for 70 years, and they still fail.
So,
humans, you can talk to a stranger on the railway station immediately and have friendly responses in both directions. They can't do that.
So the reason why this is the case and why they're not solving why they're not winning the Turing test is because winning the Turing test would mean that you could put machines in all these routine interactions, like booking an airplane, booking a hotel, and be sure the machine can achieve it. That would be the real Turing test. Why is this not happening? Because even in such a mundane and trivial conversation like booking something, there's an infinite number of possibilities how the conversation can evolve. Now you cannot train a finite algorithm to deal with infinity, right? And basically the way the conversations evolve is non-ergodic, so there's no clear pattern. And if there's no clear pattern, you cannot cover all the way the conversation can evolve. And that's why so LLMs, the best tools we have for chatting, are trained only for one interaction, one question, one answer. But how did people make it praise Hitler? By actually talking for a very long time to the model, and this way exploring aspects of its configuration that cannot be controlled in the training, in the second and third step of the training, because they are only for one question, one answer, because you cannot train more steps because there are too many possibilities. And because of this is another example that the models cannot saturate, and that their configuration is basically only controlled at the superficial level. Therefore, therefore the big vendors have also pressed longer conversations now because there were too many quote unquote scandals arising. So the LLM was asking the human interaction partner to commit suicide, for example, right? And this created scandals, and that's due to this problem.
Mm. So, am I correct in saying then that intelligence cannot be definitively defined and as such cannot therefore be engineered? And if it cannot be engineered, the best that we'll end up with is advanced automations.
Yes. So the first of your premise is not fully correct. So we can define intelligent behavior, but we cannot analyze how it comes about. So we know what intelligent behavior is, but we cannot analyze how it comes about, how the neurons of a mammal or a parrot create its intelligent behavior.
Yeah. And then
the rest of your statement is fully correct.
That involves both spontaneity and novelty. Yeah. Now the LLMs are very good if you're asking questions about Taylor Swift, because it's full of information about Taylor Swift. But if you ask novel questions, you may get no answers. You may get hallucinations. You're not going to be happy with the response. From a human, whatever response you get, you're likely to be happy with it. It will be friendly. It will tell you what to do next, and so forth. So it's not a question of defining intelligence, as Jobst says. We know what intelligent is. The problem is creating a machine that can act with spontaneity and novelty, and they can't do that. They're machines. Yeah. They're mathematical algorithm.
Yeah, so our culture has, since Descartes, has a tendency to overestimate what we can do with mathematics. And Descartes himself is rather innocent of this, but the tradition that was based on him, Laplace believed that if we could measure all the positions and velocities or momenta of all the particles of the universe, we could predict the future, but also calculate back the whole past perfectly, and that's wrong. So physicists know that's wrong. They know this in many ways, but many lay people don't, and they overestimate what can be done with mathematics. But if you ask people like Heisenberg or Feynman, they were very, very modest because they were seriously trying to model nature. If you do this seriously, like I did all my life, you become very modest. But if you're just, an entrepreneur or engineer who has a lot of money to spend, you are not taking the time to think this through. And I think all the Barry and I did is just think it through properly at the very high level of detail to get to the bottom of it. And that's what you need to do to answer such questions. And that's what, Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, all this tradition we are based on, have always tried to really get into the details. And then you realize it by itself. Then it's not scandalous. Then it's nothing special. It's just how things are. It's just the reality we're faced with, right?
Yeah, and it doesn't help to be a Luddite either.
No.
So we're not Luddites. The final chapter in the book is all about the wonderful things which AI is already doing for us and which it will continue to do. Just as all the tools invented through the Industrial Revolution have been very helpful to creating our modern technical world. So AI will contribute more to that.
So there are huge successes with AI already. And these successes have been produced by realistic AI users, right? And so the problem of OpenAI, for example, as a company, is that they have now spent, I think, 20 billion or something.
Oh, more than that.
Maybe much more. But they have not made any profit. Why not? Because there is no way to use this model to automate, right? And so only with automation can you make money with technology. Only when technology can do something that automates human or enhances human behavior, then the technology is good. Like construction machines, they are good because they replace thousands of humans who had to dig with their shovels, right? Now the tools that OpenAI is building cannot do any of this. They're just better entertainment tools or propaganda tools maybe, or censorship tools, but they cannot create any real value. And so they are in a way about to fail, economically speaking. And this is very important. Good AI, like I'm making it, has always an economic impact. So I think, is this a problem that I can tackle with mathematics? If yes, I build it and they get paid for it and everybody's happy. But I'm not willing to participate in a hype that just burns money without creating any good.
So we've got this little, this vacuum cleaner that is automated. It drives around the house on its own and it goes back to its little spot in the corner. Now that's quite helpful.
Yeah, perfect. Or lawn mowing machine, then agriculture, automatic harvesting machines, seeding machines, plowing machines. They are wonderful applications of AI. Working with satellite data, signals from satellites, it's fantastic, right? So the whole electric grid is full of AI algorithms that control it and prevent blackouts. It's everywhere and it's super beneficial. And if you subtract it, you get a much lower productivity and in the end less wealth that can be distributed. So it's everywhere. It's a great it's part of the Industrial Revolution, and I'm a big fan of the Industrial Revolution.
With the advancement in the sort of digital control grid, as Catherine Austin-Fitts calls it, where you'll have a social credit score, for example, where everything that you do is tracked and traced and monitored. And you're given a score, and let's say you go and put fuel into your car and it says you cannot have any more fuel, or you buy red meat and the machine says you're going to get penalized with some sort of carbon tax, whatever. I'm guessing the reason why that's happening is that is not AI doing its thing. That's not machines taking over. Those are automations, but are very highly advanced automations created by humans.
Yes, and they all require digitization. But I would like to say that I think this vision that Catherine Austin-Fitts is describing and also others are describing doesn't take into account what we've learned in such extreme control situations such as concentration camps or, for example, Vienna after World War II. So when you are in such a planned economy like a concentration camp or Vienna under the Allied occupation, what happens is that people evade the control mechanisms and create gray and black markets, right? So human beings, so the maximum enslavement rate of any human society in history has been 30%. Even the Arabic Peninsula had only 30% slaves at the height of the enslavement. Or Greek and Latin and Roman empires, they had only 30% slaves. If you have more, the balance shifts. So you cannot enslave everyone. So I don't believe that's going to happen. But if something like this has been tried, people will evade it, right? Like people created false vaccination passports during COVID, and all invented all sorts of mechanisms to invade. And every system of control can be circumvented if there are people inside the systems who are willing to circumvent it. And so that's why any security system of any company is only as good as the loyalty of its employees. And that will happen. So if it becomes too dystopian, people will work around it, will create ways to circumvent it. And that's why also 1984 and Brave New World are wrong, because they don't describe the ability of humans to circumvent such systems.
And I think what we know from China is that the rather ambitious accounts of the social credit system there are in fact massive exaggerations. It doesn't work for most Chinese population members.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point. When you think, you're correct. People will always circumvent these things. And I guess it circles back to your original point, because machines don't have intelligence and humans do.
Well, the control system is also set up by humans. So then you have a circle. A very good example is Napoleon rule over France. Napoleon was the first to introduce all the things that Hitler and Stalin also used, like Stasi, total control, censorship, Gleichschaltung. That means, trying to make everything the same in all the domains of all the institutions. And it was also massively circumvented. So when the French bourgeoisie was fed up with Napoleon, they paid for the British war against Napoleon in Spain. They spied on the French military and gave all the secrets of the secret plans to the Britons, the French citizens themselves, right? And so when you try to control fanatically a society, you will always fail. And the same happened in Germany, right, during World War II. So it will always fail. Now it can still create a lot of damage while they try to establish it. Therefore, it's still something to be very much afraid of and to fight against. But in the midterm, it will not work because when a few people use their intelligence to control the masses, and the masses understand this, and they use their intelligence, they are superior because they are more.
And because of the limits of the technology.
Yes, and the limits of the technology.
And as Matthias Desmet said, only around 30% of people will willingly partake in totalitarianism anyway.
Yes, I think the rate is approximately right. And I think it's also seems to be an anthropological constant, right, over time. And his 30% are very much in line with the 30% enslavement rate, by the way.
Yeah. This is such an uplifting, positive conversation. Please try and explain to me why, therefore, your book is controversial.
Barry, take a shot, please.
So the hype factor is important here. The AI technology today is so expensive, they need lots of people to have faith in it, that they're doing something good, valuable, useful, friendly, entertaining, and so forth. They need it to be a show on the road, which is getting ever more important. We point out that there's a limit, that the show, it will do the things it can do now, but it's not going to get better and better over time. On the contrary, it's almost certainly reached the point of most attractiveness and the point of least, Gary Marcus, who is one of the prophets on our side in many ways, he talks about enshittification. So the internet is becoming enshittified by the products of large language models. And so the data sources of the large language models are becoming less and less reliable over time. This is a bad cycle, which we shouldn't talk about. You probably should delete what I just said. We're not allowed to talk about the limits of this, because that will take away the money. Who's going to invest in something which is gradually going to...
But
as did every AI summer in history. So AI is a series of AI winters.
You probably have Dutch ancestors, right? Far back, I guess. And so you remember the tulip crisis, right? So
yes, in Amsterdam.
Yes. So I don't know how the part of the tulip that's under the earth. The bulb of the tulip. One bulb of a tulip was worth a house or almost a house at the peak of this crisis, and then it crashed. So I'm certain that this AI hype will crash. And the question you can never know when the crash happens, but it will crash. And I guess It will crash when our financial system crashes. And the crash of our financial system is unavoidable and will take with it a lot of hypes, because all of them rely on this heroine of money made out of nothing to feed into all these hypes. And when this money is gone, then it's like the withdrawal syndrome of a heroin addict. Then suddenly a lot of the realities will bite him or her again, right? And so I think that a lot of the hype cycles that we see since the last 50 years are very much culturally rooted in the effects of the fiat money system. As a Hayekian, I was always against the fiat money system. I think it's very dangerous and foolish to set up such a system. It privileges the wrong people in a society. It has the wrong effects. I think it's yours, Barry. Maybe you cannot put it on mute. It privileges the wrong people. And I think if this goes away, a lot of these hypes will stop.
Your book, Why Machines Will Never... what is it? I don't know in front of you. Rule the World. Why Machines Will Never Rule the World. Where can I get it?
So there is a new edition which just came out, or which is about to come out any day now.
I think it's today. Yesterday came out.
So I'm tempted to say that I will email you the link where you can get a discount, and then you can put that at the end of the interview. So, but that's the best I can do from here.
Or Amazon.
Amazon.
Yeah.
Amazon, yeah. They probably actually are copying the discount because they generally do that. So it's appearing
Amazon.
Either today or tomorrow.
I think it's already appeared, and I got the notification of my that I will they will ship my 10 copies or so today, so it must have been appeared, and you can order it, and I can recommend it. Even a layperson who's not wanting to go into the depths of mathematics and physics and philosophy can read the introduction and the final chapter. And the introduction is very clearly readable, and the foreword is very important as well. And then the final chapter gives a positive perspective on AI. And then that's all, I think all you need as a layperson. It's the last and the first chapter.
Or just use AI to summarize it. So that's the singularity. Jobst, Landgrebe, Barry Smith, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.